Good evening and welcome to the public board meeting for ST 72 Campbell Rivers on this September 24th, 2024. School District 72 operates throughout a large geographical area. Campbell River and Quadra Island schools and our school board offices are located on the traditional territory of the Liquito people, the Weevilkai, the Weevilcum, and the Quechua nations. School District 72 also encompasses the traditional territories of the Cluhus on Cortez, the Comox in Sayward, and the Hamalthco First Nations. Please note that there will be a short production delay between the live event that you are viewing and the meeting participants. And the question and answer function is open online for questions on agenda items, and a final call for questions will be made at the end of the agenda and will be addressed at the end of the session. So for chairperson's remarks this evening, as we near the end of September and the end of the first month of the 2024-25 school year, I hope that students, parents, caregivers, and all members of ST 72 staffs are settling into routines that will support a successful year of learning. For those of you who use the Peterson corridor, you may have noticed some traffic delays at the corner of Cheviot Drive over the late summer months. I am pleased to announce and express our gratitude to the City of Campbell River on behalf of the families that live in the area and attend Ripple Rock Elementary for installing a sidewalk system in response to safety concerns for kids using the corridor for traveling to and from school. The Board of Education and City of Campbell River meet twice per year to discuss ways in which our organizations can support one another for the benefit of the entire community. Thank you again for listening to and addressing our concerns, and we are looking forward to our fall meeting. This evening, the board will receive a presentation from Graham Roberts of MNP regarding the audit findings for the financial year ended June 30th, 2024. After this meeting, based on approval from the board, these financials will be submitted to the Ministry of Education and Childcare and are due by September 30th as per legislation. Thank you to Assistant Secretary Treasurer Renee McNeil, Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick, the board's Audit and Risk Committee members, and the entire school district's finance team for another positive financial audit. For anyone interested in looking at the report in more detail, it can be found on the School District 72 website. A reminder to the public regarding board correspondence. As per our communication structure, all letters addressed to individual trustees are forwarded to the board chairperson. If found to be a matter that relates to the governance, governing relationships, or policies of the school district, it will be discussed by the board with a response drafted after the discussion. The Board of Education has a defined role and is responsible for overarching policy and governance work that impacts the school district as a whole, and are not typically involved in operational matters. Should a parent or caregiver have a concern, these matters are best addressed closest to the source of the challenge by a teacher or administrator who's familiar with the participants and/or incident. We encourage correspondence on behalf of public interest, but in matters that are operational, we will forward the email to the appropriate staff member. There is an infographic describing the best way to elevate a concern under the Student Parents tab and sub-tab communicating with our staff, available also on the school district website. Monday, September 30th marks the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day. Here in Campbell River, the Liquito Family Life Society will once again host a day of celebrations and learning beginning at 11 a.m. in the Spirit Square downtown. Thank you to the staff and volunteers of the Liquito Family Life Society for your unwavering contribution for the last 10 years on behalf of the community. In recognition of September 30th, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is hosting a Lunch and Learn series this week. This series of 5 discussions center around important ongoing topics, including confronting unconscious biases, Indigenous perspectives on the UN Declaration on Rights and Freedoms of Indigenous Peoples, and how to address barriers to reconciliation. All discussions will be available on the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation YouTube channel by early next week for those interested. I had a chance to attend today's discussions and wish to share a personal call to action. We as individuals have a responsibility to learn and understand the truths of Indigenous experiences both before and after first contact. But We also have a responsibility to future generations to share our learnings with a strength-based narrative, to spend time to learn about and celebrate with children the many Indigenous heroes, intellectuals, leaders, professionals, role models, advocates, and champions who, regardless of the consequences, never stopped fighting for equality, for the truth to be told, for those without a voice, and for the rights of their communities. We need to know and understand their stories in benefit of children, so that Indigenous kids can witness their own potential to make the world a better place for the generations to follow. Thank you. On to Superintendent's remarks.
Thank you, Chair Eddie. Well, now that we're 4 weeks into the school year, I'd like to report, easy for me to say, at my table that we've had a very smooth startup, but in talking with all of our principals and vice principals, they feel the startup's been really great. We've had some interesting things occur in terms of new restrictions with cell phones. So far, those are going smoothly. In terms of enrollment, I think, we are experiencing slow growth. We're hoping to catch up to our projected numbers. We will have those numbers for the board and the public at the next board meeting, as the final count happens on September 30th, and then we do tallying for the week after that. But those numbers should be coming in, and we're looking okay on that. I did want to share a process that the board undertook last year with their strategic plan, and more specifically around the mission, vision, and values statements. Last spring, we did a survey, and we had over 700 responses to our survey, asking the public and staff and students how they felt about the current vision, mission, and values, and what they'd like to see in a new mission, vision, value statement. We received lots of data and documentation on that, brought it back and analyzed it, synthesized it, and brought it to the board. And it was the board's decision at the end of the school year to do another survey after we had narrowed down the scope of the original comments that we received. Well, I'm very happy to report tonight that we received 944 total responses. So more people responded to the second survey than responded to the first survey. We had 665 responses from parents and caregivers, 191 responses from staff members, 76 responses from students, and 12 responses from community members that were just members of the community, but not attached to a school in any way. What our hope is that we are going to bring to the next board meeting the analysis of that survey and share with the board what the public and staff and students have said, and then it'll be up to the board to make a decision regarding what they want as a vision, mission, and value statement. And once the board decides, has discussion, decides, votes on that, that'll be incorporated into the strategic plan, and the strategic plan will be set until 2028. So looking forward to that process, and something to look forward to at the next board meeting.
Just wanted to express kudos to the management team and staff for the clarity and precision. I think the choices that were framed were very easy for people to respond to. And as a result, you see that increase in participation. So thank you.
You bet. I just had just one more thing I wanted to say in relation to what Chair Eddie was speaking about in terms of community events for Reconciliation Day on the 30th. We, of course, have tons of events happening in our schools this week, and our Orange Shirt Day in the school district is on Friday. That's the day that everyone will really be coming out in orange. So we have Orange Shirt Days and pancake breakfasts. We have reconciliation walks. We have cultural drumming happening in our schools. Schools are decorating orange banners, and there's Indigenous learning activities throughout the week at all of our schools. So we're really excited to see that happening, and looking to see what happens on Friday in terms of several pancake breakfasts. I know Cedar is having one, so I plan on attending that as well as some of the board members, I believe. But it's going to be a great week in School District 72.
Thank you, Superintendent Manning. Moving forward to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 3rd, 2024. The motion reads that the minutes of the meeting of September 3rd, 2024 are hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gladish. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. The approval of the agenda motion reads that the agenda is.
Additions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Trustee Harper.
The chair seeking your advice, where would we put, for an addition, discussion on the appropriateness of doing little BC education advocacy letters on key issues to other provincial candidates locally or to the parties in the upcoming provincial election?
We could put that under electorate and board matters, 11B.
So that would be a B.
Advocacy, political advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
Any further additions or alterations to the agenda? Seeing none, the motion reads that the agenda is hereby approved as amended. May I have a mover? Trustee Gillis and a secondary, Trustee Hagan. Any discussion? All those in favor? So moved. And Vice Chair Gillis, report of board decisions from September 24th confidential board meeting.
We dealt with teaching, administrative and support staff changes and legal and financial issues.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. On to 8A, which is correspondence. So the board did receive a letter of correspondence from Jonathan Chakite, who is board president of Legal Family Life Society, requesting that the Board of Education meet with their board of their governance board to not only discuss, of course, the tragic fire that happened over the summer, but to get to know one another better and perhaps begin to investigate opportunities where we could work alongside each other and benefit of families. So I just wanted to bring that forward to the board for discussion prior to confirming, and then we'll leave that up to administrators to see if they can find a date that would work. It's my understanding that an evening session would be easier for their board. So kind of an early evening meal probably. Trustee Gladish?
I just think it's a great opportunity for building relationships and creating more opportunities to work together and learning about different kinds of services they provide and how they correlate with what school district provides as well for students, young people.
Totally agree. Any further comments? So we will reach out to Audrey or Jonathan and discuss making arrangements for us to come together and get to know one another better. Do we need? I don't think that we do.
No.
Is everyone in agreement with us meeting with? Yeah. Yeah. So we'll just
A 25th year anniversary, right?
absolutely. Excellent.
Thank you.
There are no public submissions. No agenda submissions. So we are going to move forward to the presentation of the audited financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2024. And I'd like to introduce Graham Roberts of MNP.
Yes, MNP LLP. So Graham is our chief. Graham is our chief auditor. He has actually extensive experience working in and with school districts. We were lucky enough that he was our main audit manager this year who was on site. And I definitely, I know our staff could tell the experience that he brought. It was a record audit session with him. They were in and out fairly quickly. And they definitely appreciated the approach with this year's audit. And so Graham's going to present the statements to the board.
Thank you very much. Good to be back for another year of audit, and we'll get things started off. All right, on time. So it's, right now, it's still a draft audit report, so for it to become undrafted, the board approves it hopefully tonight. And we have some legal confirmations that are outstanding, which we don't anticipate doing back anything, but we just need to get those legal confirmations back. And so it's unqualified opinion. So the reason I put this accounting framework up there is there were some capital projects in the year, so it's a good opportunity to remind the board the accounting framework. These financial statements are set, they're not true PSAP statements. So government transfers related to capital assets are not brought into revenue. Like that would be normal PSAP requirement. They are brought into revenue as that asset is advertised. So again, reason why I thought it's a good idea, just remind us why we're the accounting framework that we're using. This is a quick snapshot of the statement of financial position. Some people know it as balance sheet. You can see cash and cash equivalents down a bit. But the corresponding line below it, accounts receivable, it's up quite a bit. So you see net financial assets is 2.7 from 20.7 to $20.8 million. Reason for the big accounts receivable is those capital projects. The COAs hadn't been received at year end that are approved for, so there's a big receivable from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Accounts payable, it's also basically due to capital projects as well, timing with those invoices and year end. And we again deferred capital revenue, so that's the money that was received for those capital projects that's set as a liability and is amortized over the life of those assets, so it's gone up. So went up about $10 million of additions. That's the amortization of the current year stuff. So that's bringing that balance to the $16 million. So total liabilities is 97 million versus 91 million the year before. So net debt, that's your financial assets, that's your liability. So it looks like a worse financial position because your debt's gone up. Again, a big driver of that is the deferred capital revenue. One item that's not up there because the balance didn't change is asset retirement obligations. That's $14 million. So so no payment work was done during the years and no estimates were done. So that $14 million is still sitting on books as it was set up last year. So capital assets, so $10 million of additions again, and amortization about $4.5 million. So it takes the balance up from 78 million to 84 million. And accumulated surplus at the bottom is down slightly, 141,000 less. We'll go over that in a little more detail. Okay, so here's the statement of operations, so the how things worked out through the year. So you can see both revenue and expenses were less than budgeted, and the annual deficit is less than budgeted, and it's less than last year, so those are all good. Big things of the increased revenue was the MECT grants increased $6.4 million. That's pretty much all operating money to fund the wage increases and additional students. Yeah, it's good there. And revenue or expenses are up, and that's primarily all driven in instruction. So here's a breakdown of the revenue. You can see it's into grants, it's 87% of your total revenue. You can see the other pieces are quite small. Tuition, so that's the international student tuition, that's like 1%. Other revenue, what is other revenue? Well, included in there is First Nations education when they pay directly. That's about $2.3 million. School generated funds is $2.1 million. That's included in other revenue. And about $300K of new child care. So that's what other revenue is. Then you can see at the bottom there, amortization of deferred capital revenue. So that's again, the amortizing of those capital expenditures that you've received funding for. So expenses, by function, so first column is budget, and then the middle column is the current year's numbers, and then the prior year's numbers, 2023 on the far right. I can see things are pretty consistent. For example, construction is budgeted 77%, actual 78%. So pretty close. District administration is 4% for all of them. Operations maintenance budget is 17%, actual is 16%. Last year was 17%, so fairly consistent across the different functions. Now, breaking it out by objects, these numbers come from note 17 in your financial statements. Just shows it again. Far left is budget. 2024 is the middle column. 2023 comparatives on the right. Salaries is obviously the driver. It's 66%. Budgeted 67 actual. So combined salary and benefits is at 83% of your total spend. And 5% of that is amortization. So it's really your service and supplies is actually only 12% of your actual spend for 2024. Okay, so we had that operate or the overall annual deficit of $141,000. And we have these different funds, different pockets of money. Ones you talked about predominantly is the operating fund. So you can see we actually had the surplus in the operating fund before other transfers of $874,000. And the capital fund had a deficit of $1.1 million. And the reason for that is not all capital was funded through the Ministry of Education or MECC. So your amortization expense is always larger than your amortization for capital revenue. So there's a natural deficit in that fund. So then note 12 in the financial statements, we have these transfers. Oops. But we have these transfers again, that's outlined in note 12. So first one is for $443,000 to capitalize some purchases that are made from operating special purposes funds. And then there's a local capital transfer to purchase assets within local capital of $161,000. So the net change in the operating surplus is actually an increase of $386,000. So it started with $2.2 million and you end up with $2.6 million of your operating surplus. So what makes up the operating surplus? So in your statements in note 9, this is just summarization of note 9. So you have some targeted funding for engineering education program, some listing of operation spending multiple years of $624,000. So the total currently restricted is just under $790,000. Then unrestricted there is $1.8 million. So that's like 2.5% of your operating budget. So that's your total annual total service. So that is my presentation.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for making it clear and because the audit report is quite long. Thick. Are there any questions on behalf of trustees? Moving to trustee Briggs for the motion.
No, not yet.
No,
No.
that was other stuff to do.
And we're gonna revisit. So Graham made his way quite a ways from his house, so we get him on first to present so that he can go home and get back safely. We're going to continue on with the board meeting, and then we'll come back to another financial presentation and seek approval of a series of motions related to the statements from the board later on the meeting. So,
All right.
okay, thank
Good
you.
to see you, Brad.
Yeah.
You know, if
Safe
you,
travels.
if you lived here, you'd be home already.
I know. I don't have any school age children anymore.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Thanks.
So on to electorate and board matters 11B, which are the advocacy letters. So the advocacy letters are not in the public agenda package, but they will be made available. So the BCSTA has gathered together a group to really bring forward educational issues as part of the election, the provincial election campaign, and has provided letters for boards to share with their local candidates, highlighting the issues that we're seeing provincially around deferred maintenance costs, which is something that we feel here in Campbell River, recruitment and retention, and the enhancement of the inclusive education and student success. They're very reasonable statements. They're nothing that are kind of off of what we discuss regularly at all of our provincial trustees meetings. So the question for my fellow trustees is, are we comfortable supporting other districts that may be struggling with some of these challenges, whereas we may not locally, in advocating for educational issues become forefront in the provincial election campaign? Trustee Gladys, everyone's okay with that? Is there any comments?
Well, given our current political situation and things happening, I think it's in our best interest to make this known that these are very important issues for all of us.
Mhm.
And that we want to feel that we have the capacity to support student learning in these three particular areas. So I'm very much in support of this.
Thank you, Trustee Gladys. Trustee Gills?
And I think given our recent strategic plan, he's fit very clearly in that whole mandate of supporting student achievement, looking to our future. And these are ways in which I think we can strengthen the foundations that we have within our own district. So
Trustee Hagan?
No.
Trustee McMahon?
Yeah, I certainly think that now is a good time for us to bring our concerns to all the candidates, both within our riding and throughout BC. My only hesitation was around the form letter. It felt to me that it was kind of a lazy way to address what our real concerns are. And I would prefer to see us express our concerns in our own words.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur with that. I mean, this is the time when promises are going to be thrown all over the place, and as people want to be elected, they tend to promise things that they aren't necessarily going to keep. So my advice is that we have it written down, what we've asked them and they've said. We can get a response for afterwards, but I do think that form letters really don't go all that far. And I think it would be important if we drafted up some requests, just based on what our needs are in this district. So I agree with you that along with the form letters that is being filed by the provincial bodies, that we draft up a quick note of the issues that we consider a high priority in Campbell River.
Any further comments? So what I'm hearing is that we would like to sign the form letter as created by BCSTA in support of other districts provincially and the challenges that they're facing. But we would also like to draft a letter that reflects our local climate and needs for education to share with our local candidates. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so.
Okay, do we need a motion to direct staff to do that?
Yeah, it would probably.
Do you wanna take a shot at the motion?
So, that the, board, request the assistance of our communications staff to draft a letter that, best represents some of our concerns within SD 72 in the upcoming election and what we would like to see as support. Something like that.
Seconded by, trustee Gillis. All those in favor, or is there discussion, trustee? Hagan?
Yeah, I just thought that we should include that we as a board do support the form letter, or should that be a separate motion?
I think that we could, it could be a separate motion.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favor of drafting a letter on behalf of local needs to our local candidates? And the second motion that the Board of Education on behalf of SD 72 participate in signing the draft letter as presented by the CSTA. And sending. Moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee McMahon. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Yeah? No? Just
Yes.
yes?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that was the.
okay, okay. Thank you for that, folks.
And
And trustee McMahon?
I wanted to make a comment around the first motion that we include in whatever letter we might be sending off along under the area of concern that was voiced in the form letter around capital funding and repairs and maintenance and upkeep and what have you, that we make a special point of mentioning our concerns, our ongoing concerns for Cedar Elementary School.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like our communications manager may have heard that message loud and clear. Before that letter goes out, it will be shared with the board for review.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you, communication.
On to 12A, I'd like to welcome Brenna Ewing to the stage for her presentation. Feeding Future.
all right. Cue the background music.
Good evening. So I'm Brenna Ewing, the Director of Inclusive Education here for the district, and Laurel Vining is here to present with me. So we thought this would be a good time to give you an update on the Feeding Futures and what's happening in our district. So I'm just here to introduce because Laurel Vining and Georgina Knox, who is currently a vice principal at Sandown, have really led the work in our district. They have done an immense amount of work because, as you know, this was a grant that came forward from the ministry, which is amazing to support families and students. But putting an infrastructure in to actually make this happen has been a large amount of work, logistically, staffing. Laura will talk about it, but I really am here just to support because Feeding Futures is within my portfolio. But Laurel and Georgina, like I just want to publicly say, they have done a ton of work, amazing work, and you'll get to hear about it today. So I'll just talk about this part. So as you know, all the districts were tasked with addressing the immediate need of feeding students by either expanding current food programs or creating new ones to ensure students were properly fed, to improve student academic achievement and overall health, which you talked about, fits in nicely with our strategic plan. They're also tasked with developing long-term plans for sustainability of the program. So that was a piece of this. This can't be a one-off. It has to be something sustainable. Building community connections, building partnerships, which focus on prioritizing locally produced foods. So the criteria was you have to feed the students who need it most by increasing the number of students served, a minimum of 20%, focusing on providing food programs that are stigma-free, flexible, and respect student privacy. The increase the nutrition of food provided, and where possible, use BC grown and or processed foods, supposed to be a minimum of 30%. And the program delivery may include culinary arts programs, which you'll hear about how ours does, expansion of existing contracts, and third-party service providers. So over to Laurel to kind of talk to you about the process.
Perfect. So I'm just probably going to just more tell the story because it is a story that has evolved. So we have the grant for the province was 43 million. And I believe we in Campbell River have about 780,000, close to 800. Plus last year we applied for a grant for 100,000. So what we did to start off with was to do a district scan of what's happening in the schools and how many kiddos were being fed every day. And so we reached out to administrators and EAs and everyone who is involved in feeding kids. And we found that there were, everybody was being, all the students' needs were being looked after. But it was done in a way that was as different as every school. And we found that, say, 6 administrators every weekend were going to Costco to buy food. And youth care workers were going to Superstore to buy food, sometimes twice a week, 3 times a week. So what we decided and what we thought we would try to do is to create some systems that would have staff more connected with kids at school, so not going off and doing all the shopping, as well as try to create some infrastructure to enhance what was already happening. So we didn't want to change anything. So we have a couple different systems in place, and our elementary schools, what we've done is we've created a system where we have some kind of streamlined ordering where we have PC Express and Superstore that we purchase and they deliver. So we're not running to the stores. We're not purchasing that. We've also created a centralized system for a Costco order. So once a month we go to Costco and we have put a call out to all schools and all the coordinators, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we will gather all the orders and we do about a $7,000 shop on Thursday. And that has been really quite an eye opener. And Georgina and I, you've ever done a $7,000 grocery shop at Costco? It's quite something. We break our fingernails and we come back bruised and sometimes bleeding. But and then we deliver the food to all the schools. So that's kind of the food systems that we've created. But what we found and what we heard is that the most difficult part of the whole food programs in other districts was when the food arrived at the doorstep to getting it from the door of the school to the bellies of the kiddos. So another huge piece of work that we have done is to create staffing, and our lunch supervisors have been asked to increase their time at the schools. And those that were willing, and they all have been so far, we have this program in all schools, except for 2 elementaries that haven't discovered the need yet. But we have our Feeding Futures support staff, QP staff, and they are the ones that are doing the ordering, receiving the food, storing the food, which is another story on the infrastructure, and then making the food, getting the food to the kiddos, and doing the cleanup afterwards. So the other part of our district scan was, if we're going to put these systems in place and we're going to be ordering this larger amounts of food, 2 things needed to happen. We needed to have space at the schools that could store the food, fridges, freezers. We had to be able to cook the food, stoves and ovens needed to be purchased. Microwaves needed to be replaced and dishwashers needed to be put in place. So we spent about 150,000 of that money from last year to make sure that the schools had the infrastructure ready when we started to receive the food. And then the other very exciting piece was to get the food more localized and have the Costco run. We ended up purchasing an e-van. So we have an electric van. It's like the Amazon Prime van, and it's really fun to drive. And we also put a Thermo King refrigeration system in the back of it. So it's like we get to crawl into the cooler and it can go right down to freezing, so we can keep food frozen and cold. So by the time we had the ordering system in place and we referenced all of the grocery stores to see who could support the quantity, and who had the most competitive prices, we ended up going with Superstore for the most part. Some of the schools do use Walmart. But so we got the centralized ordering system in place, we got the infrastructure in place, we got the staffing in place, and the van in place. And then we started to pilot after spring break last year, and we started with 2 schools. This is the elementaries again, and we had them start ordering, and we started small, and by the end of June, we had every school on board. Our high schools have their cafeteria program or linked with North Island College. So last January, they were given $10,000 each for cafeteria cards to spend. So it supports the cafeteria program, and kiddos who needed food at lunch would have access to those cards. And then our youth care workers at those schools also included a breakfast program. So we had bagels and cream cheese and fruit bowls. And our middle schools are kind of a hybrid of both systems. And right now we're still waiting for our 4 commercial toasters to arrive, because we found that students were waiting a long time in the morning to get their breakfast. By the time, you can just imagine toasting, 12 dozen loaves of bread in the morning or bagels. And so those are hopefully going to be here very soon. And we've also added to our fleet of very cool things 2 commercial dehydrators, as well as a cold press for apples. So the hope is through Greenways Land Trust and our partnerships, we will be able to preserve food that's local, because as Brenna said, 30% of our food needs to be local, and we're going well beyond that. And we're going even beyond local, being BC, but we're trying to focus really hard on Campbell River.
And maybe I'll just, like, the infrastructure piece at schools, just to speak, another, like, logistics was partnering, like Jason Dexheimer and his operation and maintenance team were just amazing to work with, because what we find, obviously, in some of our older schools, Cedar as an example, is the electrical wasn't up to speed. Mm-hmm. Some of the other pieces have to be done. So Jason and his team went through, did like audit what's needed, electrical upgrades, all these pieces. So that's when we say it's one thing to say, let's bring food into our district, but the logistics and everything and all the people in the district coming together through the coordination of Georgina and Laurel has been pretty cool.
And Mike McLeod has been absolutely incredible. And I'll just phone him and say, I'm sorry, Mike, I need another freezer and another fridge. And they arrived. Every school has been provided with a Ninja bullet blender for making smoothies and fresh berry yogurt breakfast as well on yogurt parfaits. And then another big piece last year was reaching out to local businesses and trying to start to create some partnerships. So the Breakfast Club of Canada does support a couple of our schools, Pinecrest being the biggest one, as well as here. And then with the Backpack Buddies has continued, and it's about to begin this year, and we are now supporting that as well.
And just the count as of today is 306 families who are supported through Backpack Buddies, which is the food comes to our district free, which is which Deb Martell has organized for many years. It's just coming over into this portfolio because obviously it's part of the overall food portfolio, but Deb Martell has organized that in our district for numerous years. So it's hundreds of thousands in food through that partnership as well that families and students have received in our district. And again, that goes home with students on the weekend. So they can have food over the weekend or holidays if needed.
Yeah. And then we've also partnered with the Campbell River Food Bank. And that's mostly through Cedar, as well. Greenways Land Trust has just come on board, and they have been amazing. And they're bringing in about 300 to 500 pounds of fruit a day in our community. And I was part of their volunteer picking program this summer. And what they do is they'll go out and someone will say, I have an apple tree, and we'll go pick it. will weigh all the fruit. 25% goes to the owner, 25% goes to the volunteers. They split the fruit between them, and then 50% goes to Greenways, and they then return that 50% of the fruit to the food banks, people in need, and they're supplying us in the school district. So today we picked up pears and apples, and we're picking that up and we're delivering it to schools as requested, as needed. And so some of those apples that we're finding, they have, little blemishes on them and they're not, snap ready. So then we ordered the press, because last week we had to say no to about 500 pounds of apples, which was heartbreaking for me. And so I called Mike, I'm like, we need a fruit press so that we can hopefully juice these apples, freeze it, and then hopefully the thought is to send it out at Christmas time and have mulled apple ciders with cinnamon sticks going in schools. And then last year we also met with Jason Priceton and some Indigenous partners. We also talked with Walcan, and we're talking about a plan to get food fish donated so that we can bring in the cultural foods into the schools as well. And then there's a meeting next week with the Indigenous Council for creating more partnerships with the bands. And the hope maybe down the road is to maybe have a course where there's a harvest course, or where we can harvest an animal with an elder and learn how to bless and hunt and get properly certified, and then learn how to process that animal from the ground right through to the table. So we're looking to continue building local partnerships. We are also connected very strongly right now with Steiner's Bakery, and I've gotten to know them very well at 5:45 a.m. when I pick up day old bread from yesterday. And it's very exciting for me today because we've just expanded our program to have Coralie Lens support for a couple hours a day. I gave her the driving lesson today on that Amazon Prime van, and her eyeballs were this big when we got in, and she was terrified, but she did really well. And I introduced her to Greenways Land Trust as well as the bakery today. So starting Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, she'll be picking up the bread there. And Mon, who is the owner, has been fantastic. And we're getting bags, paper bags like this, full of day-old bread, which is less than 24 hours old. It's beautiful bread, up to 12 loaves in a bag for $12. So and we're starting to get that food out as well, and she's going to help me. So this is amazing. And what we are really trying to do, and what we're noticing, is that as the food has changed from your standard choice of cheese whiz and wow butter and jam sandwich, not so appealing, but will fill the belly, is that as families are becoming more comfortable and kiddos are starting to really enjoy. Today I went into a school and there was chicken fried rice being cooked. It smelled amazing. And we're trying to get systems, because once you do that, then you've got the cutlery and the plates, and just putting in an order in with the Campbell restaurant supplies for recyclable paper bags for fruit to go in. And it's complicated and big, but it's been really exciting. And Georgina has been such an incredible partner and brings such a wealth of inspiration and technology piece behind it all. And Brenna and Alyssa have been so supportive, maintenance. I just can't say thank you enough to everyone for supporting, because it feels like every day we're talking with QP, payroll, and asking them to expand and grow this program in ways that we don't even know what it's looking like. We're charting it as we go. So it's a bit of like a blind lead.
We like to build the plane as we're flying it.
Yeah.
Get a grant and let's go.
But the need is growing, and more kiddos are participating, and the food is healthier, and it's something that we're really proud of.
Yeah, I think we should be proud of the work that has been done in Campbell River with this grant and the food options for students. And that's it. So if questions or any questions?
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you about, I've always been very enamored with the backpack buddies program. So how does it work in our district? How are families identified? And then let's say you've got multiple kids in different schools and systems. How do they figure out who carries the backpack, or does it get distributed by the number of kids within the family? So it's multiple questions. But
Yeah, it's complicated in that, if there's, say, at my school, I would have 3 kiddos in the same family, we send those, because they become kind of cumbersome to pack home. We try putting them in the backpack, in an actual backpack, to make it less obvious, like, because, right, we're trying to, like, that dignity piece and that, but what we found is the backpacks would go home and they wouldn't come back, right? So, so it has become just kind of nobody really even asks questions about it anymore, and families self-identify. So we do ask them to reach out. We have, because what I have found in the past is that when we go with this family we think might tap the shoulder, but then we miss some. So we just, I just sent out a communication to the whole school community this week, inviting them for support with school supplies and with food and with backpack buddies. Hot lunch is another way we support as well.
Our youth care workers also deliver, like if the family does have multiple children, it would be cumbersome to bring home to some nights where some of the students don't attend, but we know they have 3 children at home. And our youth care workers also do deliver sometimes. So.
Trustee again?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, wow, what enthusiasm, a passion for children in the classroom, and to see a need and then try to meet that need within a limited budget. It's just like there's little arms and legs that are coming off everywhere, going everywhere, and you seem to have it under control, and we're measuring it, and hopefully in whatever we can as a school board support you in what you're doing, because it's really critical. An empty stomach is not going to be too successful students. So it's really nice to see that at least you know that they've got food in their stomachs and good thoughts in their head. And thank you.
Trustee Gladys?
Oh, very much same as Trustee Hagan. I realize how much school has changed over the years, and we're not just fueling and feeding minds, we're fueling and feeding bodies and souls. And in that way, I think we're really taking good care of children in this district. So thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you. And just finally, if, the whims of government change, please keep us in the loop on the immediate so that we can advocate to continue funding for these programs that you've spent so much heart and soul on developing. Work locally.
I believe because it was a 3-year grant, which does coincide with the election. So we'll just see what happens.
Gotta get those bridges filled now.
Thank you so much, ladies.
For a letter.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion for that letter thing.
Yeah.
And what about this? Are you willing to consider continuing this program? So, yeah, timely.
Timing. On to 13A, financial statement discussion and analysis.
Yeah, so that was a great presentation, but just to kind of point out to the board, we don't just educate kids anymore. We've got what I would say is a very large food program equivalent to a restaurant. We run childcare facilities, we support mental health. And just to point out, for school principal, that's way more complicated than it used to be. And a lot of our supports, staff, positions, administration, payroll, none of that has changed. So everybody's being asked to do more while we're continuing to do and support these expanding mandates. So the funding comes, that's one part. But of course, you've got the support that is usually slow to adjust to support those programs. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that in that I think for the most part, there are many people out in the community who are unaware of the fact that the work of a school district has really become a social services as well as an education system. And as you said, it's become so much more complicated, but so much more critical to the health of a community. That schools really are positioned in a very pivotal place in terms of maintaining the health of communities. And I'm not sure that that's well recognized.
Yeah, it's the whole child.
Yeah.
It's been changing a lot more, a lot faster lately as well.
I'd just like to mention too, that I think in terms of our community partnerships, the references to the food bank, you may have noticed locally that they have changed their entire system now, and people book in to be able to find better nutritious foods. So there's a real focus right now on what we call healthy eating, healthy living. And so they've had to change their whole system, and they're oversubscribed. But I would love to see if there was a space for us at some point to just hear from our local food bank manager how they're working with families within our community, because they're very overtaxed. But my goodness, the moral imperative is there, and they're really trying in a very inadequate building in a very poor location, I believe. I'm trying to address so many needs in this community, and it's growing exponentially for sure. So thank you.
So now financial statement discussion and analysis. So Graham presented earlier, and Graham really just presented on the first half of the financial statements. Those are our consolidated statements. There's three parts to our financial statements: the operating, the capital, and the special purpose. And what he presented was that combination. But a lot of the important stuff that is day-to-day decisions that are impacted by the board come later on. And I would love to sit here and go through those financial statements line by line with you. But
Yes.
it's better to have a written document that way you can put it down, take a look, and work through it. So I really have summarized some of the key points in the financial statements in this document. So hopefully you have had a chance to read through it. We're not going to go through that at that level of detail today. I'm just going to kind of go through a couple of points and try not to cover some of the stuff that that Graham had covered earlier. So he did talk about surplus, and really what I want to just focus on with the surplus is it's in the positive. So $383,000. It's a positive place to be in. And what it means, trustee, hey, is we're not in a structural deficit. So when we ended the financial year last year, we were in a pretty good position. And coming out of the challenges that we've faced, we've had to make some changes. It has had its impacts. We haven't been able to add what we want to add, and we have had to, well, we made some cuts a couple of years that we haven't been able to replace. So the system is feeling that, but we're now in a position where that structural deficit has been cleared out, so that as more funding comes in, it can be focused on some additions. And the enrollments that we're looking at, if we don't meet those targets, it's less of an impact than what it has been.
So if I might,
Yeah.
For those of you that haven't been on the board as long as I have, and I'm sorry I bring that up, but a structural deficit is devastating to any district. And if you're always coming from behind and having to say, first of all, we have to maintain enough to pay for a structural deficit, it's hard to start to plan for the future. And to have a positive number in that bracket now really means that we can move forwards rather than always looking backwards and keep on building that. Well, you know what credit card debt's like. It's just not the right thing.
Okay. So Graham had mentioned, and he actually did touch on the capital deficit of 527,000, the operating surplus of 386, which means overall we had that $141,000 deficit. Another thing that he reported slightly different than really what I focused in on this is we have a bit of disagreement with the Ministry of Education. We, Graham pointed out that we have $1.8 million in unrestricted reserves. That's not what we agree with. Because what the board has done is have something called it's a policy emergency contingency. And that emergency contingency makes up $832,000. So for our board, that will only be used under certain circumstances. So when we had COVID, that would be a reasonable topic to draw down. The unrestricted portion, according to our board, is $1 million. So we need portables, it'll come out of that $1 million, not on the 832. But the ministry doesn't see it that way. The ministry sees any reserve, including school supplies, that are carried over. They see that as being available to the board in an emergency. So they have a different rule of thought about what emergency. The only item that's actually reserved and can be restricted is Indigenous targeted funds. So we probably have about $2.2 million that potentially could be, but that's not how we manage at the school district. So $1 million is actually what we consider to be unrestricted. Now these two little bits. So again, sort of looking at the actual deficits, we started 5 years ago at $5.8 million. We dropped to as low as 2.2, and we're slowly making our way back. And we are building emergency contingency based on the board policy. We're not going to cut and make cuts to try to build a reserve. We rebuild it at the end of the year if there's funds available. And again, there's a little graphic chart there for to show. Graham definitely did a really good job with the this charts. Now, again, I would encourage you to read it. The special purpose fund, a couple things here. Our special purpose fund are monies giving to us that are, we're told exactly what to use it and only on that. We have a $9.2 million annual special purpose fund. It's almost its own school district. There's so much activity in there, and there's a lot. So it's a huge support. It's like 10% of things we do is actually funded through this manner. If it goes unspent, it actually has to be spent on that same purpose the next year. Now, of the special purpose fund, we talked about feeding futures earlier, 709. It started, you heard Laurel say that the pilot ran and it kind of got started towards the end of the year. So we actually have $230,000 not spent from last year that will carry over to this year. So there actually will be some additional money available to get things going and to continue to sustain it. Another big new item, well, it actually came the year before, was the student and family affordability. We still haven't spent all of that. We got a little bit extra money last year, but we have a plan to support students and families over the next 2 years with that. So we don't seem to get a lot of extra in operating, but we seem to be getting a lot of extra in the special purpose fund type programs. Capital, Graham kind of touched on it. The child care is a huge program and it's impacting a lot of different ways, from our bank balances to what's happening with our surplus, and just it's a positive. Like no matter what, adding assets is a good thing. So $8 million there. Our annual facility grant, which is up to our discretion, is still sitting at $1.1 million. It was nice to get that boost a couple of years ago, but it hasn't gone up again as everything continues to go up. Now, I have a financial analysis and I'm not going to go detailed. Again, Graham kind of touched on some of that stuff. He pointed out that the huge increase in revenues was really due to wages. The only thing that I need to point out is on our statements, you'll find one item that shows childcare fees budgeted at $658,000. but the actual revenue was like 287,000. That's not actually what happened. What happened is we set our budget up, and then when we went to do the financial statements, the Ministry of Education said that we needed to record it on a different line. So the $158,000 up there is actually childcare fees, it's childcare. And then there's also a little bit of stuff in the MOECC. So overall, our childcare results were, we ended up with a little bit less budget revenues than what we had budgeted, and our costs were a little bit more than what we had budgeted. Overall, it still covered its costs. So it was I would say, a very successful first fiscal year for our childcare programs. And yeah, not to go through all the others, the last.
Could I just ask you about the teacher on call, you know, the actual and the budget figure? Do you think that is that a predictable, is probably going to increase over?
I think it will. So some of what you're seeing there is a lot of our programs that are starting to come back and be more normal. So we have our SIC programs, and yes, they're being very well used. We had a couple of years where we were a little bit behind and kept raising our budget to cover it. And it had stabilized. I think what you're seeing a little bit in this year's statements are, we have other district programs that are utilizing teachers and releasing teachers from classrooms and are then bringing in teacher OCs.
Okay.
And so that's difficult to budget for.
Yeah.
Well, each department will have their own budget, but as they want to use a TTOC, it ends up, the cost goes into the TTOC, but their budget, it doesn't show that's coming out on the statement.
Just if you don't mind, Kevin, regarding the boarding allowance, is that due to the Cortez program? The 105% increase regarding boarding allowance demand higher than estimated
That is,
under student transportation?
Transportation.
yeah, so, yeah, we haven't, we actually haven't increased that budget at some time, which we should do. It kind of goes in 4-year cycles when the grade 9 start coming.
Mhm.
And it has been growing, like, for a long, long time, like, for probably decades, it was at that $31,000. But we can increase it to match, so, but we do pay a boarding allowance for students that can't attend school each day, and they will board in town. So that's where it's from. So, yeah, and the one thing is good, they're choosing to board at our schools in our cities rather than go to a different school district.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last bit is some of the capital assets. So we continue to purchase various pieces of equipment. I won't go through each of them, but we've got a list of some of the bigger annual facility grant programs that we have. We've got, all of this is positive, and all of this only has come about, a lot of this has come about in the last couple of years, because all those items are in the capital budget summary, that $2.3 million, that funding actually didn't exist like 6 years ago. So that's part of that carbon neutral capital plan, school enhancement plan, playground. So very positive for the board that is continuing to improve their schools. So that is in a nutshell. Doesn't look like statements, but that is kind of the summary of the summary. So does anybody have any questions on stuff?
Trustee Hagan.
There's quite a bit of work that's involved with all of these audited statements, with the amount of work in the background to gather all this information. And from my understanding, this was a very successful audit. And I think that Kevin, you can be proud of the job that you've done, but you have a whole team that's behind you that we'd like to thank as well. And just appreciate all the work that goes into it. And it was a very succinct report you gave tonight, which is also appreciated.
Yes, I'll pass along our appreciation. Again, They work hard every summer. They're here most of the summer. But this year in particular, our accounts payable staff, which typically took about 4 weeks to close out accounts, they did in 2 weeks. And then Renee got right on the statements to produce what you have here. And like yeah, she does a really good job. The sooner she can get it to me, then the sooner I can dig in on some of the analysis. Yeah, I've got to definitely thank them as well for the work they do.
So moving forward into motions, on behalf of the Audit and Risk Committee. And I will turn these, do you have the motions in front of you, Trustee Briggs? I will turn this over to, Trustee Briggs.
Am I just reading the first one?
Yep, you can go with the first one.
That the audited financial statement for the term ending June 30th, 2024 be adopted as presented by Auditor Graham Roberts from the firm MNP LLP.
Do we have a mover? Trustee Gillis, seconded by Trustee Hagan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Excuse me, do we need all 3 readings? Do we need that in this?
No, because it's only a single motion, but there will be 3 motions for different portions of the audit report.
And I would like a chance to speak to Dee
Before we get to that. Okay. So on to 13C, Trustee Briggs.
That the reserve transfers for the term ending June 30th, 2024 be adopted as presented.
May I have a mover? Trustee Hagan, seconded. Trustee McMahon, all those in favor?
And that motion is to just double check if we're building a school board office and making transfers, that the board's aware of all the transfers. If anything like that were to occur, our transfers are quite small and yes, are in here as well.
We're not building the school board.
No.
No, it's not. Our new school board office. And
To compete with Courtney.
13D, order folks, on to 13D, Trustee Briggs.
That the management letter be adopted as presented by Auditor Graham Roberts from the firm MNP LLP.
May I first have a mover? Trustee Gladish, Trustee Harper, and Secretary Treasurer.
So I wanted to bring this to the board's attention because in some years we don't get any management letters, but we do hire auditors and they come in and they take a very thorough look. And one of the things that they found that we're not currently doing that they would like us to do is we have a purchase card program to purchase a variety of supplies. And the GST recording on those programs is it's not working the way our regular purchases are. So what they would like to see is for us to make sure that we get the GST and the GST rebates. What that does mean is more money for us. I would say it's like thousands of dollars that we will benefit from. But they have issued an audit report on that as they would like to see that corrected. So, and yeah, we definitely want to make sure we share it with the board. So.
And the systems, have you worked with the systems as to how you're going to rectify that?
I believe we can. It's getting it in place. We've had our purchase cards for maybe like a couple of years. But it's knowing when and where those things come up and making sure that we have a system in place to claim that GST for the rebate. So we can do it. But yeah, it hasn't come to our attention so far. So, but we'll do it moving forward.
Thank you. And so moving forward to the vote on the motion that the management letter be adopted as presented, may I have a vote, please? All those in favor? So moved. On to, that closes the financial statement discussion and analysis, the recommendations from the audit committee. On to 14A, educational issues, which is parent code of conduct. Associate Superintendent Kyle.
Good evening, trustees. Just briefly, you are aware, I believe, that that we have, here. Had installed at, I think, all of our schools except for one are now done. This signage is at all front doors as well as offices for the public to come in, and that would be parents and caregivers. We've had to do this because we've had escalating behaviors from adults that are coming into schools that are not good for kids to see or witness or be a part of, and certainly not for our staff. So we really wanted to make sure that there was a check at the door, just a reminder for people, the adults, to come in a way that is respectful. And we know that parents and caregivers are emotionally charged if something isn't going well for their children at school. But we have to make sure that people have that reminder. We think it's a gentle reminder, but please respect staff. They're there to help. They're there to work as partners, but swearing at them, intimidating, being aggressive, and in some cases physical with school staff is just not something that we can have for our staff and for kids to be witness to. So this was one of the steps that we're taking. The other one is that there is a code of conduct for parents, and it's in line with student code of conduct, trustees code of conduct. We have policies and procedures around our staff. So we have for all groups, and parents were the last group that we wanted to make sure that we had, again, an understanding, a shared understanding on how to come into our buildings, how to respond with staff. We have teachers being emailed at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock, and then upset that they didn't have a response for the next morning. That is unreasonable. Again, swearing at, being aggressive with staff and teachers and administrators is just something that we really want to remind people by going through this as to how to conduct ourselves as adults in the building. So it was sent out to all parents, along with a flow chart that our manager of communications, Jennifer Patrick, had done around if there is a disagreement, if you have concerns, this is who you contact. Teacher first, then administrator, and then if need be, coming to the board office or the associate superintendent, Sidmith or myself, because we both have sets of schools that we work with. But it is, again, a shared understanding. So we just really wanted explicit versus sort of thinking that everyone understands how that might look and sound when you go into school. So going back to BORBA, for those of us who've been doing this for quite a while, what does it look like? What does it sound like? That's what it looks and sounds like. So the response that we've got, there have been people that have responded, and it's mostly favorable, saying it's unfortunate that you've had to do this, and a couple that have been not as favorable, but it's also because they're in conflict with a staff member at a school, and so it's an individual situation. So overall, it's been favorable. Staff across the district have expressed on many occasions, either as I'm walking by or to some of our senior leaders, how much they appreciate that this was done for them. Any questions or comments?
No questions. A comment, of course, that we're living in strange, polarized times, and our commitment as an education system is first to the safety of the children, second to the safety of our staff. And it saddens me that we have to really clearly state what the expectations are when entering our buildings, but I think it's important and valuable, and just continues to equip our school-based staff with tools in order to navigate these times.
Thank you.
Trustee Britton?
One of the feedback from one of the students in the student leadership committee, just a different perspective, that they saw it as a thank you to all the people that were behaving appropriately. So
Nice.
yeah, positive spin.
Nice. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just kind of lost on my agenda here. Just a moment. On to the minor capital plan submission for 25-26.
And so annually, those capital assets that I pointed out, they come to us through this application. Our Director of Operations works with our maintenance lead hands, and they identify urgent items that need to be repaired. And so we have a list here of our top priorities. We typically get funded for about a quarter of them. Some things to note, Ocean Grove is currently the next playground application, but usually we get every second year. So and we had 2 years in a row. So I don't know if that means that maybe we don't get approved for 2 years, or if somebody just didn't apply and we took advantage of. And then the other thing too is Feeding Futures. We are applying again for another $100,000 for some of the kitchen upgrades. So yeah, and if the board passes it tonight, potentially we get approval letters and this can be construction underway next summer.
Excellent. And trustee Hagan?
So moved, the minor, capital plan, submission.
Oh, you'd like to move it?
Yeah.
Okay, and the motion reads that the board approve the 25-26 minor capital plan submission as outlined in the summary. So moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Gillis. All those in favor? So moved. And just to note that this is minor capital improvements, and we do submit a major capital improvement plan in which we are requesting things like school replacement.
Yeah.
Trustee Hagan?
I have a question of whether we can move all three.
Finance warrants?
Financial warrants in one motion.
If you can identify each of them, just so we have record that we've got June, July, and August,
I'm happy to do that.
then yes, we can do them all.
So on to items 15B, C, and D, which are finance warrants. And I'll combine them as one motion, that the finance warrant number 12 dated June 30th, finance warrant number 1 dated July 31st, and finance warrant number 2 dated August 30th, 2024 be accepted as presented. Trustee Hagan, may I have a seconder? Trustee Briggs, and all those in favor. Thank you. And congratulations to the team for having the finance warrants all the way to August 30th done.
Yeah.
On to committee reports, 16A, the core professional development update, trustee Gladish.
Let me see if I can find my notes here. I met with this one group on September 16th, and it was very, very engaging meeting. There was a lot of reflection about the TTOC event that they had on August 20th and the general attendance. There were some highlights about the school-based day on August 29th and something about the variety of different workshops that took place. And I was very impressed to know that some of them were actually on some math and literacy focused topics. So also they did something that's called Socratic seminars, which I loved. I used to do that in high school. Lots of discussion about the upcoming year, about the provincial day on October 25th, on the March 31st district day, Indigenous focus days. I mean, these people are very busy getting things in order to make sure that we've got some really stellar professional development events coming up for this year. They looked at the budget and are looking at really important things like, what is in place for mentorship for especially new teachers, and what are the resources that are in place. So a very good meeting, and I really enjoy meeting with this group of people. I also want to just give kudos to the chairperson, Erin Pickering, who gave one of the finest territorial land acknowledgements I've ever heard. And it should have been recorded. It was that good.
Nice.
Thank you. That was it.
Thank you, trustee Gladish. Followed by committee reports on behalf of trustee Briggs for the superintendent's student leadership committee.
We met September 9th here at the board office. We had a dozen students, some new faces, represented Southgate, Phoenix, Timberline, and Cary High. Trustee McMahon, Superintendent Manning, and Executive Assistant Natalie Crawshaw. We discussed the impact of the new cell phone guidelines, in which the students had a lot of positive things to say, such as the improvement of socialization, along with some constructive criticism for us, such as the difficulties of checking their after-school plans at the end of school. So there's some adjusting going on. We talked about the parent caregiver code of conduct that was just presented and their impressions of it, as well as future topics to guide our agendas so that our meetings continue to be student-driven. We'll meet at the various schools throughout the year and look forward to continuing to hear directly from our students.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And just a little comment that I heard in one of the middle schools. They said that this startup this year was much noisier than in past. And I said, why is that? They said, everyone's talking to each other, texting. And I think, wow, it's working.
Excellent.
That's great.
Is there any other business? Are there any questions from anyone present or online? Absolutely. Deborah Coombs?
I just want to, thank the board for the, parent code of conduct. I know over the last couple of years, there have been, polarizing behaviors. And I think, the question is, what are some plans in the works for implementing that code of conduct in terms of, administrators, perhaps, I don't want to say deflecting, asking parents to connect with teachers first, or teachers knowing what the expectation is in terms of reasonable amounts of time to contact parents or to get back to parents on issues and things like that. The follow-up pieces, I'm asking, are those in the works or in the plans, or was that part of a rollout that went so smoothly? I just haven't heard about it.
I'll turn that either over to you.
I think always, Deb, when we're meeting with our administrators at our district leadership team meetings, topics like that come up. When we have scenario-driven topics, we have, this parent code of conduct was a big issue for administrators because they were seeing how affected they were being in their schools. So we will follow up on this for sure.
Any other further questions?
There are no questions from online.
So I would like to propose a motion to adjourn. Trustee Higgins. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.